want to support. Iran is a civilization that's been around for thousands of years, so saying that you're going to officially end it is quite the claim, and I think he might have undercut himself with a lot of ordinary Iranians.
What started all of these tensions? Because we heard that there might have been some Americans that were being targeted. That's why the president sent over some bombers and some aircraft carriers to the area. But did all this stem from us being pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal?
Yeah, I mean, the tensions have really been building up for month to month. The United States pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, imposed a ton of new sanctions, damaging Iran's economy, and then recently the United States, the Trump administration, announced that it was going to declare a major piece of Iran's military as a terrorist group. Now, the Iranians, they've kind of been still sticking with the nuclear deal, but recently they said they're going to take steps to reduce their commitment to the deal. They also are pretty upset about the terrorist designation of one of their major military units. And so this has just been a situation where now they are apparently making moves that the U.S. feels are threatening, whereas there is also the argument that the U.S. is making moves that the Iranians feel are threatening. And so it's kind of becoming the question of like the chicken or the egg, like which came first, whose threat came first, and which one is going to lead to what.
Iranian officials have said that they've quadrupled their uranium enrichment production. Their uranium that they have would still be enriched only to that 3.67% limit that was set under the nuclear deal, but they could go beyond their stockpile limitations pretty soon. How does this figure into the whole discussion?
What they're hoping to do is they're giving the Europeans and other parties to the deal, like Russia and China, a couple of months to find ways to ease the economic suffering that they are facing right now as a result of U.S. sanctions. So they said, look, guys, you need to help us get out of this economic mess. Otherwise, we're going to start walking away from the deal and enriching uranium and doing these other things that puts them in violation of the deal. Because the way the Iranians look at it is, look, we signed up to this deal saying we would eliminate our nuclear program so that you guys would lift economic sanctions that were already on place earlier, and so our economy would improve. And so they just feel like it's become a very one-sided deal. And I just don't see how the Europeans are going to be able to pull together anything that helps Iran's economy in the next 60 days. I just don't understand how that's going to happen, because European governments cannot force their businesses to do business in Iran, and that's really what it's going to take to help their economy.
You're listening to the Daily Dive Weekend Edition. I'm Oscar Ramirez, and we'll be right back.
This is a Fox 13 weather update. This is Fox 13 meteorologist Patrick Feed. Another unseasonably warm evening across the Mid-South. Overnight lows falling to the lower 70s with lots of sunshine in the forecast for your Sunday. Daytime highs warming to the lower 90s with heat indices at 95. I'm tracking higher heat indices in extended forecast to find out how warm things will feel. Tune in to Good Morning Memphis starting at 6.
Welcome back to the Daily Dive Weekend Edition. If the Europeans do come to some sort of deal, some type of agreement, where does the U.S. stand on this? I've seen that they're still threatening to sanction companies that import oil from Iran, things like that. So what is the U.S. going to do if they come up with some type of deal?
The U.S. is taking a very much like a take no prisoners approach to this thing. The thing that's really interesting about the U.S. sanctions on Iran is that they target companies and governments elsewhere beyond Iran and beyond the U.S. that do business with Iran. So European companies, Chinese companies, etc., they are subject to U.S. sanctions, meaning they can't access the U.S. market if they try to do business in Iran. And if the Europeans were to find some way to get around it, I don't know how they're going to manage to do that, especially if they rely on the dollar as, the exchange as the main currency. If they can do that, if they're going to try, I think the U.S. will have to impose sanctions on some of these European companies or firms, or Chinese or Russian, I should say. And if they don't, if the Americans don't do that, then it kind of is like these other countries are calling the United States bluff on sanctions. But I think this administration very much is prepared to issue fines and cut off the U.S. market from some of these foreign companies just to send a message that they should not do business with Iran.
How much of all this is bluster, and how serious are these threats? There was a rocket that landed near the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. They said that nobody was harmed, and it was kind of unclear who was behind the attacks, but that's what prompted the president to tweet out, Iran wants to fight, that will be their official end. So where are we with this?
I mean, you're asking the million-dollar question. How much of this is just a bunch of talk, and how much of it is serious willingness to take military action against people or organizations that the U.S. thinks threatens Americans?
But both sides said they don't want war. The president has said that, and Iranian officials have said that as well.
Well, yeah, but they each also say, but if the the other side does something, we will respond with military force. So the question is, who's going to go first and who's going to try to de-escalate this the best? There are efforts. They're talking to other countries. People are trying to quietly mediate and bring people off the cliff a little bit. There were also reports that there were Iranian allied militia groups that denounced and said they had nothing to do with the rocket being fired. That might be a sign of them trying to calm down tensions. But yeah, I mean, look, wars can start over any number of things, and this is one of those situations where it could be some low-level guy, like, accidentally firing a gun.
Yeah.
And, next thing you know, we could have another war, and I think that's what really, really worries a lot of people.
The last question I have, do we have any official communications, back-channel communications with Iran? Because the president said, I want them to call me so we can negotiate something. Do we have that open line of communication?
Well, the Swiss serve as our protecting power in Iran, so they've always been a channel for us to communicate with them. Officially, the Iranians do have an office with the United Nations. There's probably ways that we can get information to them. And also, it's quite possible, but I don't think they'll admit it, that the CIA probably has some sort of a line to Iranian intelligence that they probably don't want to make public, and that's just my guess, but it's probably a pretty smart guess. But to be honest, dude, so much of this is actually being done, like, in public, on Twitter. Yeah, it's like, why do you need a back channel?
Right.
Like,